Hi and welcome to another episode of Celebrating Small Family Businesses. And today we are celebrating Natalie and JJ. Now, and you both got different last names, so rather than mess up, I just went with first.
Oh, we're totally fine with that.
Okay. And Natalie and JJ are hosts, among other accomplishments, are hosts of a podcast called Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver, which we have had the honor of being guests on as well as listening to some. So it's a very worthy cause that we are happy to celebrate.
And two sisters.
Yes, 2 of 3 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
Let's start there. I'm an only child. What's
there you go.
what's it like being 3 sisters in a little town in Tennessee, was it?
A little town in Tennessee. I always jump in and say I'm the oldest. Natalie would normally tell you that. Natalie is the middle, and then we have a younger sister, Emily. So
She's the baby.
There is 3 of us. Yeah, she is the baby, and it's been fantastic. I think we always say we're thick as thieves, and always have been. We always have had one another's back. It's kind of been interesting to always have a best friend or worst enemy sleeping in the bed beside you. I don't know. So we always shared a room when we were little, so a big room. So it's been fun. We were raised in a small town in Tennessee, and I think it was good. Natalie, what do you think? I mean, we grew up pretty good.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. I mean, I think we were very fortunate to be surrounded by family. All of our family lived near each other, and our grandparents were influential in the community because they were small business owners, and we're from rural East Tennessee. And so, typically they were, my grandmother played piano in the church, and typically, small business owners are typically leaders in especially in rural communities. Business owners typically are leaders in other parts of the community. And that was no different with our family. And so we very much grew up with an attitude of service. And whether it was good service in the business side of the house or serving other individuals in our community, it was very important to our grandparents. And that's something that was instilled in us and that we carry over today.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so glad you brought that out. That is a dimension we really haven't talked about. But yes, the connection between, especially in the smaller communities, between the business owner and their activity in the community, they couldn't be invisible or disliked and expect to have a thriving business, could they? Mm-hmm. So they go together.
Yeah, and I think there was also the aspect of social responsibility. I know we've talked about that. That was really important for our family. It was a poor coal town. There were coal mines up in the mountains above it. And so part of that social responsibility, I think even before that was a really politically correct or political term, was they always made sure that the community was taken care of. It was was in business for almost 50 years. Prior to that, my grandfather actually owned a business that was a restaurant that was adjacent to the hardware. And people are always fed, but the hardware in particular, they sold kerosene, they sold coal. And in that type of community, money comes in particular in the spring because people have crops in addition to their jobs in the mines. And so when people needed fuel, kerosene, or anything like that for the winter, and they didn't have enough money for it, we had a cigar box, and they would just go tear a piece of paper off the register and write down, John and Connie, and they owe $4 for kerosene from back in December. And then in the spring, they would come in and pay the cigar box receipt.
Yeah, we ran, our grandmother, they ran credit. And so, and it wasn't like credit like people think now. So, but everybody knew everybody. And there was a level of taking care of each other. I mean, our grandfather used to drive people to go vote. And they thought that was so important. People had the right to vote. And so, I mean, especially in rural communities, you knew your neighbor. You knew a lot about your neighbor. and so, but you did. It was the right thing to do. I think that's really where we come from, is a right thing to do. mentality.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
That is so cool.
So did you guys work in either the restaurant or the hardware store or both when you were young?
Yes.
Yes.
But no. The reason I say yes and no is I have no qualms in saying I was my grandfather's favorite. So there's 11 cousins, and we're all varying ages, but we used to be dropped off at the hardware because our parents both worked, and we'd be dropped off and I would help. So I learned to count on the cash register when I
Right.
was 4 and 5. I would do get to ring up folks who would come in, and that's how I learned to count.
Yeah.
And so and then I would count checks in the back when my grandfather was closing up, and it was, it was nobody, it wasn't a perfect childhood. Nobody has a perfect childhood. I don't believe in those. I think everybody has normal things, that ups and downs, but we are our family, every Sunday, our family had Sunday dinner after church together. I mean, we are very traditional family. And I don't want to say Southern family, because I think other families across the U.S. can relate
Yeah.
to that, is that it's when families live closer together, because you didn't have as many distractions of technology, and people move farther away. Whereas in rural communities, you stay. And I mean, we lived outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. And so, we had one aunt who lived in Knoxville, and that was the big city. That was like 20 minutes away. And so we're like, oh, they're more affluent, like, cultured kind of feel, like not even like rich. It was just, you get to see something bigger than the rural area that we were in. But we were very, very blessed to be a part of it. And again, it goes back to learning, like, how I live and how I manage as a supervisor in my workplace, and how we operate businesses ourselves, is based on how our grandparents and my aunts and our uncle, who also ran the hardware, and all of our cousins worked there. I never got paid. I just was there torturing people.
Well, but I think it also taught, I say for us, it taught us a lot of customer service skills. We were kind of the greeters, but it was amazing. Nellie talks about learning how to count. I worked with my grandmother kind of at the desk area. That's where she did invoicing, or she learned to order. But it's interesting what, as females, as the girls, because there's 3 of us, we were the girls, I would go and watch how they shook paint on the old paint
Put
shakers.
your finger on it and it's like,
yeah. And I'd love to watch how they made keys on the old. So I'm that technical mind, and they would go out and shovel coal or sand. And like Natalie said, our cousins, the boys, they all worked there during the summer. Some of them worked after high school. It was just, and again, we don't want to say it's a perfect family, but it's everybody learned their lessons. It was, I learned how to weigh things on a scale by weighing nails. It was a good childhood back when. I don't think people will ever see what that kind of childhood is like anymore. I think it'll be hard to find that, but we learned a lot that we absolutely carry over with us today.
And I straight up got in trouble for mixing feed. So I'm going to tell you, we had big barrels of feed that people would come in, and I would just move all the seeds from, because it was a big scoop, and my uncle, again, I was the favorite. I got away with a lot of things.
It was grass seed, and she would be mixing like Kentucky, the bluegrass with different turfs. Fine. And we got in a lot of trouble for that. Yeah. It was mainly Natalie.
Mostly
so but she could run really fast, John, Connie, so it was okay. She was little.
It was just really fun to play with that big scoop, right?
Yes. There's something
and she was
very
the favorite.
It was something so therapeutic about mixing all the seed.
We just let her think that she was the favorite. But I think it also taught us to be in awe of so many things. We take so many things. We were so lucky because when we went to school, there were so many things that we were able to see. And it's kind of funny things, like they had a very large safe in the store. It was in the store. And so to be able to see the mechanics of things like that, and to watch, we were in awe. We had a Coke machine on the front of the street, and it had knee-high grapes in it. And so, and Yoo-hoo chocolates and upper tins, like the back when RC was the thing. And we would get to go open the machine.
And I got to put the cans in it. Nobody told me that was like a job. And I was like, can I put the cans in?
Yeah, and so I think we lived in a state of awe and didn't realize how great our life
Yeah.
was, but it was, and we learned so much from
Yeah.
it. And I love to share the stories when we were kids because it was we laugh and we say it was a Camelot of sorts for a small, well, it was a large East Tennessee family, but it was a very good life. It's a childhood that I look back with a lot of fondness.
That's wonderful. And gosh, I hear so much in there, but those family values that you were saying you learned so much from about customer service and how it influenced you later. And I've heard this story from multiple people. Sometimes they learn things from a work culture, that working in just happen to get into a place that really nurtures people. Sometimes it's family, but the people that go on and start their own businesses and do well seem to have something that they're drawing on like that from their past.
Yeah.
And all those different things of practical, transferable skills like weighing nails.
I know.
Well, and it was the hangout for the older people. So the hardware
Okay.
was people would come and sit and hang out, and that's when people would hang out. And you'd have all these older gentlemen who might be retired. They'd come by and they'd hang out. And I can remember, that's where I learned to really. Children learn by observing what's around them, and that's again. I never knew a stranger, but I got to stand on my little stool and work the cash register and take money and count change. But I can remember listening to the gentleman sitting around there was this big giant furnace right in the center of the hardware. And that was the way that the hardware was heated. And so everybody would come and sit around it, and you'd hear them telling these stories. And that is something like, I love. I'm very endeared to older people. I've always been very endeared and have just a high level of respect for my elders. And that was solely because of the way we grew up in the church, the way we grew up in the hardware, being surrounded by, and you understood like the next steps. You understood what you were doing at various ages because we truly grew up in an intergenerational setting. And I
Exactly.
think that is something that is also missing from our culture now, is really learning from one another. And JJ was older than me, but I had cousins. I mean, we ranged probably 15
Risa
years.
was in probably kindergarten, and our oldest cousin had graduated
So we got about 15
from high
years. Yeah,
school. So
15
about all
years.
of us.
And
Yeah.
then all of our aunts and uncles. Our mom is one of five. Our dad was one of five. And family is just, again, we're a very typical rural community. Your family doesn't typically leave. Everybody lives within a 10 to 15 mile radius, and that's exactly where we were.
Right. Wow. Yeah. What a different world.
Yeah, it really was.
Exactly.
It really was.
I got to say, I kind of liked it. I mean, I favored it. So I don't know if I could go back there for just a little
Yeah,
while. I think
right.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that would agree with you on that. Simpler times and
Yes. Yes.
and
Yeah.
tighter community.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that thread that you just mentioned about the revere for older folks, that seems to lead into where you are now. So you guys, at some point, I mean, you've had careers, right? You've each had your own career, separate corporate careers, and then sometime, I want to say a little over a year ago, so I discovered you watching you speak from a stage in January. At the
We don't know how
podcast
we
in
got
Orlando.
Well,
But you were celebrating about a year at that, I think, at that event, which is a big accomplishment, by the way, in the podcasting world.
Yeah.
100 episodes in a year are both big milestones that say you're ahead of, like, I think 95% of the rest. According to this one guy, he said, that's his cutoff. He calls it pod fade. 97% of podcasts don't make it a year.
Right.
And if you're starting a podcast to make money, you're probably better off just going and starting another business, odds-wise, but like purely from the...
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
having laid all that groundwork, sorry, I'm preaching. How did you guys decide to do a podcast? And that's your business today together, right? Your family business.
Yeah. So JJ's background is in corporate finance, and my background is in human services. Both of us have noticed the service piece of it. We never left service. And so I think that's really, and I know even though JJ was in finance, we won't hold that against her.
That's true. I was a banker for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
But even after, I left, and I'll interject that in there, that after I left, I was downsized out of my corporate job and thought the world had ended.
Yeah.
And then I decided, with my partner, with my husband, we decided we'd open our own business. He was retired. And from that, so far we've been in 5 small family businesses and sold 2. But there was something in there that said, why go back into corporate? And I always stepped out of larger banks. I got out of the corporate environment with large banks and always went back to a community bank. So I think that's really important when we talk about smaller communities, family businesses. That's where I always found my heart, because I knew the people better. I knew the owners, and it meant something more to me.
Yeah.
But the road that led us to this is, I think, Natalie, it goes back to servant. And I think a really personal, intimate sort of feeling about what we owe people. But that was what, 2 years ago?
Yeah. It was in 2022. It was my husband was diagnosed with head and neck cancer, and so the sisters, who I always refer to the sisters, not Catholic, we're Baptist. The youngest sister Emily came and moved into my house and stayed with my animals, because my husband and I temporarily moved up to New York City for his cancer treatments. And then when we came back, felt like something was off, couldn't figure out what was going on. And in talking with JJ and Emily about it, they said, we also have these same feelings, because at the same time that I was going through and working with Jason to go through his cancer treatments, which were successful, we were also caring for our mom, who has been living in with Parkinson's now for well over 20 years.
20 years.
And our dad had passed away 13 years ago this year. And so we supported our mom, and we were going through all this stuff at the same time, because our mom was young. Our mom was at that point in her 60s. She's 69 now. And so I felt like there was something going on once we identified self-identified as caregivers, and we learned more about it. It was like this whole world opened up. And I saw on Facebook an advertisement to learn how to podcast. And I was like, that's a great idea. And I've done radio in the past. I'd looked at potentially going on to do radio when I was younger. I had actually wanted to be on radio doing counseling, and decided not to do it. My mom was mortified, because I kept joking with her just to get a rise out of her that I was going to be Dr. Ruth on TV or on radio. And she was just like mortified. Notice that good Baptist background. And so you can tell I'm the middle child. But I said, hey, I think we should start a podcast. And they were both like, okay. And none of us had ever listened to a podcast. And so JJ and I immediately put on.
That's really important.
Yeah,
because I need to say, I didn't know how to find a podcast.
Didn't either. That's what makes it so great. And so JJ and I put on our corporate hats, and we were like, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it for real. And so I was so jazzed about this. I took the class, and so we were excited about it. And JJ and I were like, Emily just follows along. Emily will tell you. She's just like, okay, just tell me what you want me to do. And so we were like, well, if we're going to have a podcast, how are people going to know about us? So we thought, well, we're going to need a website. And so we immediately went into, and then it was, well, if we have a website, then we still need to find people, because how will people find our website? We need social media. And so we took all of our background experiences and applied them to the podcasting world. And a lot of people told us we've done it backwards, because we started everything in September and we launched in January of 2023. And so 2022 is when we started everything. We built our following. We wanted to do a grassroots kind of growth. And so we put out this really ridiculous challenge, which aligns with mostly me. And JJ just says, yes, let's do it. We wanted to be the #1 podcast on January 24th, 2023. And so we would call out people like Joe Rogan, you can take the day off. Michelle Obama, you can take, you know what I mean? Like all these big national podcasters, international podcasters, and we're like, make Carrie #1. And so we enlisted tons, like everybody we knew, and we didn't do too bad. I mean, I don't think we were #1.
Well, it's funny because at the first Podfest I went to, we had just launched 2 days prior, and so I was a little bummed. Natalie didn't go with me. But I
Yeah, I
said
was
to him,
working.
I said,
I had to still
"Yeah,
work. We
yeah,
didn't quit our day jobs.
yeah." So I said to him, I said, we just launched, and we wanted to beat Joe Rogan, and he kind of laughed. He was like, "Oh yeah, you just launched," and I said, "We got 1,000 downloads on our first day," and he looked at me like I was crazy, and he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yeah." So we only got 1,000, and he said, "Do you understand that most people on their first day are lucky to get 5?" And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "JJ, imagine this: 1,000 people showed up in a room to listen to what you had to say." And at that point, I was like, "That's pretty cool. I would never imagine that."
On day
And
one
but
without knowing without any pre,
wow,
reputation from hearing from
yeah,
other people.
yeah,
My goodness, you
yeah.
you
So,
guys
but
had
I
an
think
amazing launch.
I think one of the reasons that it stuck and that it hit people and that day and those episodes because it was so personal,
Yeah.
and we told our story, and I think every business has to be personal,
Hmm.
and I think that's key to a small business owner. I know, if you look at it, it's hard to look at a business and not say, how am I going to make money? Okay, what is, if this is my drive, how am I going to make money? But if that's your main goal in going into a business, if you don't have a passion for it, that's hard for me to ever do. Randomly, what we opened, we had a hobby shop in the basement of our house, which was a terrible idea, but it was for terrible. But it was saltwater fish hobby shop because my husband was really big. We love saltwater fish. And what happened was people kept on showing up at our house. And what we ended up doing was once I lost my job, we opened up we had some friends that owned a building. And what that ended up being was one of the largest stores in the country. In like 8 years, we were 10,000 square feet. But we had
Wow.
such a passion for service. One of our favorite accounts was going into nursing homes. We did custom design work and things like that. And so that's passion and that's heart and that's finding the piece of the business that you love, and that goes out. People see that, and that's how you make a business. And just like what we did, Natalie shared some of the hardest stories about her time with Jason, and they were hard stories, about difficulties with marriage and taking those cancer treatments, parts of the caregiving story that most people don't share. And when people hear that and that authenticity, that's what drives people to a small
Mhm.
business. You don't get that you don't want to call out the big businesses, but you don't get that at bigger businesses. It's hard to get that personal relationship because people just show up to work. They're a 9 to 5. If you're a small business owner, you're living it. You've cleaned the toilets, you've not got groceries so your employees can get groceries, but you have such a passion for it,
Mhm.
Yeah,
and I think that's what makes us different.
there's a piece
Is
about knowing the owner too.
Hmm.
When you're working with a
absolutely.
smaller business, you know that you know the owner, and then you can go to that owner, and the buck stops there. Where when you're
Absolutely.
working with a corporate, you're there's layers and layers, and you're never going to talk to the owner.
Exactly. Exactly. One of the funny things about they know us by name. They know Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver, but they also know it's JJ and Natalie. We go by the sisters. But same thing with our small business. We had a name of our business, but they also called it. They would go to this 10,000 square foot building. They would go to Dexter and JJ's. Dexter's my husband, so it didn't have to be. They're going to run over to Dexter and JJ's.
Hmm.
It didn't have the fish store name. So I think you're exactly right that it is a very personal story. And as we get into it's that affiliation that I can know these people, I relate to them very
Mhm.
personally. I think that's what the podcast, I think that's what every business venture that Natalie and I are in, that's what we want, is that we want to be open about it. You get us, that's what it is. And if you can't see what our mission is, then it's hard. It's very important to us, I think, Nat, that we align with other businesses as partners, as sponsors that share a common mission, a common goal, common values. It would not be thinkable for us to align with someone that didn't share that heart to
Yeah, we're
serve.
not
We
willing
we
to
couldn't do that.
sacrifice integrity for dollars. And so
Yeah.
you have to align with us, and I think that's really important. And ultimately, and this is what I saw in my grandparents, but then you got to understand our cousins our uncles are all small business owners too. I look back at it now and I'm like, oh, they did technically own their own business, whether it's heating and air conditioning or our cousin's a chiropractor or, whatever. And then JJ having her fish dynasty, which I kept telling her she should offer up the sushi side of the fish store to keep the other fish in line, but she did not ever align with that. Fine,
No.
whatever. That's
I thought
fine.
that was bad business practice.
Whatever. It's sushi. It's fish. You want live. You want whatever. But
Bad for business.
Yeah. So I think you are the brand in a small business, like allowing people to know who you are. And I think I don't understand like part of it for folks who choose to keep that separate. And I think it's just because of what I've experienced that it's personal. People, it's like church. You don't go to church for the building. You go to the church for the people. And so what is your experience? And so customer experience is so important and ingrained in us both. And so whether it's through the podcast and what's that feel that we want to come across, or what I do every day, I'm a human service concierge. If I don't know the answer, I am going to find it for you. And
Right.
I am quick under crisis because families, for me, I work on the mental health side of the house for my full-time job. And I live this way. I've approached everything, whether it's talent recruitment or foster parent recruitment or providing services and connecting families with the right services. It is about being responsive. It is about they know they can trust me. And even if I don't have the answer, they trust that I will get it to them. And they come back to me every time. That is building brand. That's building brand loyalty. And I am an extension of the brand. And so for us, that's what we do with the podcast. And that's why we are, we are the brand for Confessions. It is not just the podcast. We are the brand, and people are like, oh, that's a sister. That's a friend. That's my girlfriend. Cause I always joke. I'm like, we're pretty, but we're not too pretty. So I'm like, we don't want to be too pretty. I mean, I nailed it today on this makeup. And so we want to be relatable. We want to be the girls next door that are your friends, that are not intimidating, and that they're like, oh my gosh, let's just set up and we can just chat away. And that's what we want people to have a sense and feel.
Yeah.
But I think even in our corporate careers, we dedicate, and I dedicated so much of myself to that personal relationship. I know Natalie does to this day. When you get to that point and you give that much to a corporate career, you have to sit back and go, wait a minute, I am a brand, and my heart, I put it out on the line. I should do this for myself.
Right.
I could do this. Let me offer this for myself. Let me be my own boss. And that is a big step. Like there's a big canyon you got to go across to get to that as a small business owner. But when you're ready to take that leap and say, you know what, I can do this for myself. I do it so great for someone else. Let me take the chance and do it. Those people, they follow you. They follow your mission, your personality. Even with different types of businesses, that drive and that attraction, that's what you have, it's going to carry over into other business lines or the same business line. But to take that risk, there's something about it. I know Natalie and I love. We're like, all right, let's do it.
And that I'm trying to come back to the family part of it because it's so woven into what you're doing. It's just this underlying assumption almost, and your family feel. You're talking about your personal brand, and both in Confessions and in corporate. You're bringing those family values and that family feel to your personal brand in corporate as well as your podcast, and it's just part of who you are.
Yeah.
So
I think talking about the hardware store, that family business, it was a gathering place. That was a big part of the brand, I'm sure, was that gathering place and those men sitting around the stove and the restaurant next door and all. Oh my gosh, yes. I mean that's very hard to compete with. I'll say it that way. A well-defined brand like that's based on a family or a person, very hard to compete with. And that's what I think a lot of small businesses miss. Our family business was the citrus business, so it wasn't as public, but my father was very private. He wanted, you don't talk about the family business outside the business. and so that focus on privacy, I think, was a limitation. I mean, it was protective, but it was also a limitation.
I think about for us in the hardware and how, while, your financial information, you kind of keep, that was a Southern thing. Maybe it's everybody. You keep that kind of tied to the belt. But, I think about all that we had, my grandmother, we had pictures of us in this hardware. So you think about this 20-foot ceiling and these 10 tiles that were part of the roof. But there, if you remember Olin Mills, those big, huge oil portraits, they lined, so you have 5 different families, 5 different children, and then all of their children. And so we have, I remember that there were large ornate framed photos of us.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of us were there on the very, somehow they got stuck up there in this old hardware, which prior to being a hardware, that building was a stable. So it had wood floors that were, so it's all this historical, I think about it, my heart just is full. But there were these big pictures of all of us, it's like, oh, that's JJ, when she was 2 and I'm, 16 now. And, but at that, they knew us. Even when we weren't there, they knew us.
Yeah.
And so.
And I remember when I was a little boy, there was a hardware in Winter Haven, Boland Hardware, and wood floors and the high ceilings and the tent, all the stuff you're talking about, that's an era.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think I will say this though, we are sisters first, and then we over here, and then we are also business owners together. And that is something that is different than it's working with your family. But JJ and I are equal partners in the podcast. And so FYI, in case everybody thinks that we are like besties, like we're sisters. And sometimes we get on each other's nerves. And so it's really funny because we've had some very direct, heated conversations before, because JJ and I am very type A personality. JJ is also a type A personality, but we're different. And I think the most unexpected thing that in going into business with my sibling, very different, I think, than going into business with your spouse, because JJ can speak to that, because you can leave him and you don't get to leave me. And so we're super tight. You got to understand, JJ and Emily and I are all 2 years apart. And so we're super, super tight. But we will argue at times like sisters, but it is, our work is different. So how I thought of JJ and how JJ works, like how I know her as a sister, her work is different and my work is a little bit different. And so in those first, I won't even say months, year, it is honing in on our strengths and being able to say, you do this, you do that, and not
and then saying, you're not the boss of me, I'm not doing that.
Oh Lord, Emily has told me you are not my boss, and I'm like, well then don't act like a staff member. And so
that is one of the most
true.
Interesting dynamics. And one of the other things we would say with a small business is
we're not leaving that, so I'm going to come back, but go ahead.
You still have to step away, though, because what we find ourselves doing is that when we talk to one another, it's business only.
That's right.
And there are those days, and our youngest sister is the one that called us to our attention. She said, you never call and ask about me. You never call anymore and say, hey, what's the dog doing? Hey, how's Brandon? Hey, how is this? And that's the thing I miss. And that was a call out, like that was a slap, like, holy crap, we are, this business is important. What we do is important, but would you sacrifice that at the cost? Would you do that at the cost of your relationship? Yeah. So you have to make sure that's something you have to work at to make sure that there's separation of church and state. There's separation of sisterhood and business.
Yeah.
Well, and family of these, so there's the business, the family business, but there's also the business of family, and they're intertwined, but they're not the same.
Exactly.
And there has to be a fluid balance, right? They're going to be
exactly.
There's going to be seasons, right? When you launch this, we're preparing to launch this. It sounds like it was an all-out frontal assault on social media world. So there probably wasn't a lot of time for, sister chats, but then you come back. Right. So there's always going to be temporary imbalances we can't maintain. It's unreasonable to think every day can be the same. Right.
Right.
But wow, you guys have. So I have typical questions that I ask, and you've hit on them or answered them already. But I still want to bring them out just so So one of them is, what's a challenge that you've overcome that other small businesses could learn from in terms that you've overcome together. So you talked about, and I really want to go to, if I may, and stop me if it doesn't work, but where you talked about, you fight and you argue and you figured, that's where a lot of families get stuck, right? They don't know how to fight fair. They don't know how to have the family battles or the family dynamics in the business and make it work for the business, and find, I don't know, clarify the roles. I know that's part of it, but how have you guys, what have you figured out? And what would you share for somebody else that hasn't figured it out?
I can say we don't always fight fair.
We don't.
That's
I think, I know, but and I think for me, it's with Natalie. We had let's call it a heated debate the other day. Heated, but in the end, because here's the thing, Natalie's type A, and she says what she wants to say right then. I am the thinker, and so I have to think through my process, and then I build up, and when I explode, then she's like, holy crap, why are you so mad at me? And she gets her feelings hurt, and then she cries, or she I can see it well enough. I'm like, she never cries, she's always so mean. But when we're done with it, there's this little, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say what I said. It takes a little bit of time. You don't have to regroup right then, but it's like the next morning. I think you both have to be thoughtful, and you have to be intentional about, okay, what just happened and why did it happen?
Yeah. And I would say this because I think typically what happens is that JJ and I are never mad at each other. It is the stress of things that are going on, and that's actually what led to it. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It might have been something so minute like, well, I don't understand why you didn't do this, and it was all these other pressures that came in. And I'm about, I work in the mental health field, so I'm all about relationship repair. I'm never going to ruin my relationship with my sister for anything. I'm just not. And it doesn't mean that we're not allowed to get into an argument, because the other thing about it is that we're siblings. And so we have a strong relationship bond, which means we take that for granted. We know that we're safe to say certain things, and that, and we have to be careful with that. You cannot just push that card to the farthest edge. But, sometimes you say hurtful things to the people you love because you know that they're safe. And so for us, we don't typically get into arguments a lot. We get frustrated about things happening, and we're like, oh, and so she gets right in the car, like we're Thelma and Louise when we get mad together. We're like, oh, let's just go. But at each other is not common. At each other is not common. But it took us a minute to understand our skill sets, to know JJ does this and Natalie does this. Like, JJ will laugh at this. She does not answer emails as fast as I do, and I find that exceptionally annoying. And so I'm like,
what? Every 5 minutes? I mean, I might answer the email tomorrow. Someone sends it to me, and then
terrible customer service. And so
at 8 a.m.
And so
that's the difference between HR and finance. See, with finance, you hold all the cards. You can afford to make them wait.
That's exactly right. And so, but here's the thing, JJ, I know exactly what she'll respond to, and I know what she doesn't. But I'll also ping her and say, make sure you see this, because we get a lot of emails.
I say, I saw it.
She's like, check. So before we even for today, last night the system sent out the reminder, and I was like, don't forget we have this at 8, because I know she cuts off email so much better than I do, because in my field it's always 24/7. It's like I'm available 7 days a week because of children need foster homes, or children need services, or if you have an acute crisis, you have to be always on. And so I'm always eyeballing things on my email, because that's how I've operated for 25 years. Whereas JJ has been in positions that don't require that level, and and I choose to do it. So you got to understand, I am not a martyr. I am paid, but I choose to live like that. And so I had to adjust my expectations of her to not place my values on top of her professional values, if that makes sense.
Bingo. Huge. Mm-hmm. I think that's so important to call out, because even in a family where we have, there are a lot of shared values, and there's some assumption. I think there's an excessive assumption probably in a lot of families that the values are shared, especially generationally.
And in the same order.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that recognition of different values, there's a cognitive bias. We kind of focus on cognitive biases. There's one called fundamental attribution error, and it's where we assign a behavior, a characteristic to someone, or even a mistake that they make. We assign that as if it's a character flaw. It's a permanent fixture of that person rather than something they did. And the values is the same way. That you got the person who's got their values, and they're allowed to have different values. Right? They have to be. And navigating that and recognizing that first, and then navigating that, is such a big differentiator.
Yeah, we really had to work with that when his mom had at least 14 different kinds of dementia. So, you had to kind of know which one you were dealing with at the time, and treat her still as an 85-year-old woman who, had run her life for a long time, and be respectful of that. Right. Well, there's other stuff coming in and out of the picture that you're going, ooh, what is this?
Yeah.
And now what
Absolutely.
do we do?
Yeah.
So separating the two has been a big eye-opener for both of us, and probably saved us in a lot of ways.
Well, and just in our marriage, I'm more of a detail person, and Connie's more of a get-her-done person. And, that's a value, at core, that's a value difference, right? And if you don't resolve that and figure that out, it's just like this all the time.
And I will say that because I worked with my husband in the other business, yes. There was definitely he's the idea guy. It's very funny. Let's do this. He's kind of like Natalie. Let's do this. And then I'm like, do you know what that's going to take to do? And I will implement it. But he has no idea. Like, Natalie has these beautiful ideas. Let's do this, and this on the website. I'm like, are you serious? If we have to pay somebody to do that, it's going to cost this. And she was like, well, I want to do it this. And I'm like, do you know how long that's going to take? She's got these fantastic ideas. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But same thing with my husband. We had to, it's kind of funny. We had to share an office for a little while. And in our very first building. And there were moments I didn't want to hear him breathe. I mean, he's open to that. He knows. And he would say, hey, I'm leaving. Do you want to ride with me to the store? And I would be like, I would rather walk to the store. I wouldn't say that, but I would be like, I just want the 15 minutes in the car by myself.
I remember she would tell me that too.
I mean, I would leave, but I would go a different route. And the reason is, it's hard to work with family. And I think if Natalie and I were in the same town, because I'm in Florida, Natalie's in Virginia, so we do a lot of remote work, but she did recognize really quickly that for my lifestyle, for the way that I work, I do have to cut it off at 6:00. The expectation is we do have dinner together. We do things in the evening. And her life, the way that she and her husband work, it's different. So, and they totally understand that, but you have to be respectful of the way those two families work. And I think that's been a big thing for us, because when she messages me at like 9:00, and then she'll call and she'll be like, did you get my message?
That was early on. Now I know not to.
Yeah, that was early on. Now she's like, I'm not even going to call.
Well, but
I mean, why would I?
She doesn't really check her email or text message in any way. But I think it comes back to, if I'm texting you after a certain time, it's going to be very important. I need you to know it, or can it wait? Yeah. And so with my position, I have to do a ton of stuff after hours. And my husband has, basically is like, Job, has the patience of Job, and to put up with me. He's very different than me, and he knows how I work. I'm a 12-hour a day girl, and I work. I only take Saturdays off because I typically work on Sundays and in the afternoon, and so but that's my personality. He knew what he was getting when he got married. And I try to make sure that I don't take advantage of that. And the sisters will be like, hey, FYI, don't forget about your husband. And I'm like,
who's in there on the couch?
it's fine.
Go in there.
But even, and then, but again, it comes back to communication, being open and transparent and being honest about it. And even if you don't like the answer, that's okay. It's still, it's okay. I don't like this, but I can live with that. If you can't live with something, then you better talk about it some more, because it's going to build up into a blow up, and it's never worth your relationship over what ultimately the argument's about so much more than what the actual issue at hand is.
Right.
And that's funny because our dad, when you say that, Natalie, our dad passed away at 58 playing softball of a massive heart attack. And, we say our mom had Parkinson's. She's had it for 20 years. We always thought Dad would take care of Mom. And so we inherited Mom. We laughed about that on our podcast.
We did.
We got Mom. We didn't know how. But when we talk about the way Natalie works, and she gets so furious when we say stuff, she works that hard all the time. And we build up this anger. And then I say to her something like, I don't want you to die like Dad. And then and so when we talk about things that build up over time, sometimes it is a really personal thing. Yeah. And so that is when things come out at their worst. That is, there's so much care in there. But that is when a blow up happens, and there's so much underlying care and concern for it as well in a family business. So
I want to make sure we don't fight all the time. It's just,
oh my God.
But JJ and I really strongly believe in our own opinions. She taught me that. She said that one time. She goes, I really believe in my own opinion. I welcome you to dissuade me.
I love that.
I would say this, and it's interesting, in our business, my oldest stepson worked in our business. He was our store manager. And he had a saying, there are 2 rules in our business. Number 1, JJ is always right. Number 2, when in doubt, refer to rule number 1.
And you can tell she's the oldest.
I've got to call out the language difference there, because that's where we work. Okay, so
yeah,
the second one, the joking one, the 2 rules, that's where a lot of people live. It's in the world of right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If we differ, each person is in that position of, well, I'm right and you're wrong, and that's a very difficult place to be.
Oh, it's
but
totally
when you say it like, I really believe in my opinion, you're welcome. I welcome you to dissuade me or persuade me otherwise. What a difference! What a
really
energy that is. Oh my God, that's brilliant.
Well, and here's the thing, I am totally okay with being my solution. I don't want to be right and wrong. I am okay with allowing the idea to evolve, and because I am comfortable enough in myself that it doesn't have to be my way. And I believe JJ's that way. So when we're thinking about things like, how do we want to move forward with this? I have this idea and I think this is the right way. And JJ comes back, and we were in a meeting the other day, and she was like,
that's what I was thinking of now.
Let's not do this because of this. And I'm like, oh, even better. Because if you're confident in your own ability, then you're going to be fine with allowing the idea to evolve, because it was never about you in the first place. It's about the mission and what you're trying to get across.
Yeah,
correct.
Right, exactly.
And it's funny because we were in a meet. So in addition to the podcast, we do series, we do training, we do speaking events. So this is not always just a discussion about a podcast, just so you know, that's not just what we do.
Okay.
And, but it was interesting. We were in that meeting, and we were planning to do a large series and training event with another company. And so this company, Natalie, Type A, she's rolling out exactly what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And I have missed 2 meetings. And so they're all sitting there like, they are just afraid to talk, I think. I look at their face, I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are not going to talk. And I hear it, and I'm like, whoa, that does not sound good. And Natalie's like, what? And I'm like, I think that we should have this person, this, and this. And then the other people are like, well, that sounds like a good idea. And I'm like, these people are scared to death of her. And they're not. But I think that we work so much better as a team, because it is safe for us to kind of, okay, yeah, I like this better. No, I don't like this. I don't like that. But our best ideas have come together when we work together, and the ideas have changed, but it brings out the best in both of us. And when we put those together, it's kind of like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I got the jelly, she's got the peanut butter, put that together, and we're like, wham, that's the best sandwich ever.
I'm pretty sure I'm jelly, though.
You can be jelly.
I'm pretty sweet.
Yeah.
I can tell.
I'll be the peanut butter.
You're the
Oh, my
kind that
goodness.
sticks to the roof of your mouth.
And a little
Do
nutty.
you see the abuse I get? I don't even know how long this podcast goes, but
Maybe
we
I'm
are-
very
crunchy.
confession.
You know, maybe you are jelly, and I appreciate that and a little nutty. Maybe I'm crunchy.
You're like nutty peanut butter. You're the
Well, we are at our normal
Oh, that's too bad.
cutoff time.
darn it.
So we have had so much fun talking
this
about
is
this, and
fabulous.
I can see we could do this 2 or 3 more times and still not cover everything. But you have brought out so many aspects of family. I don't even want to say family business. I want to say family in business, family working together that that aren't often expressed and not as eloquently as you have. So thank you so much for being our guests on this, and we wish you the very best. I know you've got other, you're still growing your podcast, and you got
We
other
are.
We'll come back.
projects on the stove.
We'll be
but
back.
Oh,
we
we'll
will
be back.
Look forward to that.
Yeah. And honor your grandparents too, because they set the whole thing up in motion. And what?
absolutely.
Wow. I'm so in awe of them.
They were amazing people.
I bet
Very,
they
very
were.
blessed to have them.
Because look at you guys. You're a great result of that. So
I think they did that for our entire family, though.
Yeah.
You
There
have
you
to
go.
look at 11 of us, 11 grandkids, their marriages, their my aunts and uncles. And, still to this day, I'll toss this out last. My Aunt June, which was my mom's sister, she's the first sibling to pass away. She passed away back in February. And while Natalie and I live distantly, the rest of them pretty much all live in the same community. But when we saw each other at a funeral, this is you're at a funeral and we haven't seen them, some of them in years, 10 years, 15 years. And we see these people, it's just like yesterday.
Right back.
It's just like we're like right back. We're meeting up for lunch after church, and you're at this funeral, but you see these people, and you are so filled with love and so filled with the best memories. And that's what family is, and that's why family business, it needs to thrive. That's what they built in us is just that's what it is. It's family, and it's good and bad. They're yours.
That's right.
exactly.
Yes, I loved what you said about with your sibling. The business can end, but the family relationship still goes on. So
Yeah,
that
that's exactly right.
That's helps people keep it in perspective of what's important.
Exactly.
Yeah, we
Exactly.
always say you got to have holidays with them.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You know,
Plan for that.
Exactly right.
Exactly. There were times when I wanted to
Go somewhere else.
not be nice,
That's okay.
but knowing that we had to have a family dinner,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
that was family time versus business
Yeah,
time. And then the next morning, I could go in there and remake
Exactly.
a new one,
Yeah.
which I did.
Thanks
once
for
or
the
twice.
turkey. And by the way,
Yeah.
Anyway,
This has been so much fun.
Thank
you
you.
again.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.
We appreciate
thank
it.
you.
it's been so much fun getting to know you, and can we do this again?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh, trust me.
Good. Well, we'll stay in touch.
Sounds wonderful.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.